CPU socket. The CPU socket is the large square slot located near the center of the motherboard, and this is where the processor is installed. The socket acts as the main connection point between the CPU and the rest of the system. Different processors use different socket designs, which is why not every CPU works with every motherboard. Right next to the CPU socket, you will usually see several tall slots placed in a straight line. These are the RAM slots, also called DIMM slots, and this is where the system memory is installed. RAM temporarily holds the data that the CPU is actively using, so it can be accessed very quickly while the computer is running. Now, if you look around the CPU socket, you will notice several small square components grouped together in rows. These are part of the VRM, which stands for Voltage Regulator Module. The VRM controls and stabilizes the electrical power that goes into the processor. Since these components work with power constantly, they can generate a lot of heat, which is why on most motherboards they are covered by metal blocks called VRM heatsinks. And slightly below the CPU area, you will often see another metal block or small heatsink placed on the motherboard. Under this heatsink is the motherboard chipset. A chipset acts as the communication hub and traffic controller on a motherboard, managing data flow between the CPU, memory, storage, and peripherals. BIOS. Below CPU socket, you will also find a small chip called the BIOS or UEFI chip. This chip contains the firmware that starts your computer when you press the power button. Before the operating system loads, the BIOS performs basic checks on the hardware and prepares the system so everything can start properly. Close to this area, you will usually see a small round silver battery. This is the CMOS battery. Its job is to keep important motherboard settings stored even when the computer is turned off. Things like system time, boot order, and BIOS configuration are preserved using this battery. Near CMOS battery, many motherboards also include a pair of tiny pins called the clear CMOS pins. These pins are used when you want to reset the BIOS settings back to factory defaults. This is especially useful if incorrect settings prevent the system from booting. Some modern motherboards also include a feature called BIOS flashback. This usually appears as a dedicated button on the rear I/O panel along with a labeled USB port. BIOS flashback allows you to update the motherboard BIOS using a USB drive, even without installing a CPU or RAM. PCIe slots. Moving further down the motherboard, you will notice several long horizontal slots. These are called PCI Express slots or PCIe slots, and they are used to install expansion cards. The largest one is usually the PCIe by 16 slot, and this is where the graphics card is installed. Then there are smaller PCIe slots, such as by 4 or by 1, which can be used for things like sound cards, capture cards, or network adapters. Because modern graphics cards can be large and heavy, many motherboards reinforce the main PCIe slot with a metal frame. This reinforcement helps support the weight of the GPU and prevents the slot from bending or getting damaged over time. Near the PCIe slots, you will often see flat connectors placed along the edge of the board. These are SATA ports, and they are used to connect storage devices such as hard drives and SATA SSDs. Each port allows one drive to communicate with the motherboard using a SATA cable. In more modern motherboards, you will also see small horizontal slots placed directly on the board itself. These are M2 slots, and they are designed for compact SSDs called NVMe drives. M2 drives plug directly into the motherboard without needing cables, and because they connect through the PCIe interface, they can be much faster than traditional SATA storage. Many motherboards also include a small metal cover on top of these slots to act as a heatsink and keep the SSD cool during heavy use. Power connectors. Along the edge of the motherboard, you will find a large connector called the 24-pin ATX power connector. This is the main power input for the motherboard, and it connects directly to the power supply. Through this connector, the motherboard receives the electricity needed to power components like the chipset, RAM, PCIe slots, and many onboard controllers. Near the top of the motherboard, close to the CPU socket, you will usually see another power connector. This is the CPU power connector, commonly an 8-pin, or sometimes a combination of 8-pin and 4-pin connectors. Unlike the 24-pin connector that powers the entire board, This one specifically delivers power to the CPU and the VRM so the processor can operate properly, especially during heavy workloads. Around the motherboard, you will also notice several small connectors with labels like CPU underscore fan or SYS underscore fan. These are fan headers, and they allow you to connect cooling fans directly to the motherboard so it can control their speed automatically based on system temperature. You may also notice small connectors labeled RGB or ARGB. These are lighting headers used to power and control LED strips, fans, or other RGB accessories installed inside the case. Rear I/O panel. If you look at the back edge of the motherboard, you will see a row of ports grouped together. This section is called the rear I/O panel, and it contains the external connections that allow you to plug devices directly into the computer. The most common ports here are USB ports, which are used to connect peripherals such as keyboards, mice, external drives, and many other accessories. Different motherboards include different numbers and speeds of USB ports, such as USB 2.0, USB 3.0, or Type-C. You will also usually find an Ethernet port in this area. This port allows the computer to connect to a wired network or the internet using an Ethernet cable, which is often more stable and faster than wireless connections. Next to it, you may see several small round audio jacks. These are the motherboard's audio outputs and inputs, used for speakers, headphones, microphones, or surround sound systems. Some motherboards also include video output ports such as HDMI or DisplayPort. These are used when the processor has integrated graphics, allowing the motherboard to send video directly to a monitor without needing a dedicated graphics card. On motherboards that support wireless networking, you may also see small threaded connectors for Wi-Fi antennas. These allow the system to connect to wireless networks using the motherboard's built-in Wi-Fi module. Front panel connectors. Along the bottom edge of the motherboard, you will usually find a group of small pins called the front panel header. These pins connect the buttons and indicator lights from your computer case to the motherboard. Through this header, the power button turns the system on, the reset button restarts it, and the small LEDs on the case can show things like power status or drive activity. Near this area, you will also see larger internal connectors labeled USB headers. These are used to connect the front USB ports of your computer case so you can plug in devices like flash drives or peripherals from the front panel instead of the back of the PC. Some modern motherboards also include a special connector called a front USB-C header. This allows the USB-C port on the front of the case to connect directly to the motherboard and support high-speed data transfer. You will also notice a connector labeled HD_audio, or AAFP, usually located in the bottom corner of the motherboard. This is the front audio header, and it connects the headphone and microphone jacks on the front of the computer case to the motherboard's audio system. You may also find additional headers placed around the board for specialized features. One example is the TPM header, which allows the installation of a trusted platform module used for hardware-based security features in modern operating systems. Here is another video you may like.